Hi there, it's Tuesday the 13th of October 2020. We're continuing to look at how to maintain balance in life, which is not very easy to do, of course. And I was using the analogy of the tightrope walker who has to maintain balance, walking along a tensioned wire between two fixed points and having to try and keep his centre of mass or centre of gravity over his support point, which is usually his feet, of course. And how in life we talk about walking a tightrope, trying to maintain balance. There are often tensions that we find ourselves walking along in life. There are tensions which we experience. There are often things which pull at us from different directions, different demands, different relationships, different goals, etc. And we have to try and keep ourselves centered over some kind of fixed support point in our life. And of course that best of all is our relationship with God, with Jesus, who was the most balanced person who ever lived, and he had so many pulls and tensions coming round about him all the time. He managed to maintain that centre of balance. And of course Jesus speaks to us through his word and says lots of very helpful things there which can help us to maintain our balance in life. We're going to look at some verses in Ecclesiastes chapter 3. You maybe have heard these before, and they're all about opposite points of life, and there are clear tensions between these different points. Let's have a wee look. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. Very interesting. All these contrasting points on the scale of life: birth and death, laughter and weeping, joy and sorrow, different points of life. And we are trying to maintain balance. Now that doesn't mean necessarily that we always place ourselves halfway between these things. It doesn't mean that we never weep or we never are full of joy. It doesn't mean that we try to live life with half joy and half weeping right in the middle or half embracing and half refraining. Doesn't mean when you give somebody a hug, you give them a half hug, because you don't want to go to one end of full embrace and you don't want to go to the other end of refraining, and you're trying to get a balance, so you do it half-heartedly. No, the Bible doesn't mean that. And in fact, the Bible says that we shouldn't be half-hearted. In fact, we should be wholehearted about whatever we do. Actually, what the Bible says is, if we are weeping, we should weep wholeheartedly. We should give ourselves over to weeping. We should weep uncontrollably. In fact, that's what Jesus did when he wept at Lazarus dying. He didn't just weep half-heartedly. He wept, and that Greek word means to weep unconsolably with deep sobbing. So he gave himself to complete crying and weeping and sorrow when it was right to do that. But he also gave himself to complete joy and complete laughter when it was right to do that. So whatever it is you do, you should do wholeheartedly. Having balance in life doesn't mean being half-hearted, but it does mean that we understand that when we are in sorrow at one end of the scale, we don't stay there. We don't stay in the tipped scale forever and ever. There is a season for sorrow, but the balance is that season should then tip, and it should tip then over into joy, so that we experience our joy. The next season that follows a season of weeping should be the season of joy. The Bible says that, doesn't it? Weeping may endure for a night, but what comes next? Joy comes next. Joy comes in the morning. So when we are in one season, the next season should balance that out, and we should experience that so that we can then have ourselves redressed and rebalanced. So whatever season you find yourself in, at whatever end of the scale, know that it's a season which is there for a time, that it will come to pass, and that there will be a balancing out. And that's the way we need to look at life, and we need to look for the balance, because God will seek to bring that balance to us. May God help you, and may God bless you in your life to find His balance. Speak to you again tomorrow.